What's up, guys? Welcome back. Study Club episode 2. My name is Tony Benito, and today we are talking about everybody's favorite topic, veneers. Now, for those of you who don't know me, I have spent the last 6 years working as an associate for a very highly cosmetic practice here in Charleston, South Carolina. My boss is actually the current president of the American Academy of Cosmetic Dentistry. So I've learned a lot over the last 6 years, and I've seen a lot. And we're just going to talk over some of the intricacies of veneer cases because I feel like we all want to be doing these types of cases, but they're not as easy or as straightforward as people make them look on Instagram. So let's get into it. All right, so this is a patient who came into the practice and she is very young, 14 years old. She has a history of fluorosis. So one of the little intricacies here in parts of Charleston are that there are areas that have historically had a high level of fluoride in the water. And so we see these cases that pop up from time to time, and how this manifests are teeth that have a lot of kind of splotchy coloration, either white or brown coloration on the teeth, and whitening really doesn't do anything to help solve this problem or even out those areas of chroma on the teeth. So this patient had gone to a few dentists, and for our practice, we are a general practice, but we have patients who come to see us as almost like a specialty clinic where they come in just for concerns about their smile, and they know that we're really good at what we do, so they come just for that one thing, and then they'll go back to their general dentist for their comprehensive care. But this was a referral actually from the general dentist. And when I sit down to talk about cosmetic options with a patient as young as 14, the first thing that comes to mind is I want to be super conservative. And when I say super conservative, I mean I don't want to touch the tooth structure at all. So if possible, I am going to do all treatment on a teenager completely additive. Now, in this case, this is very difficult because obviously different teeth have kind of different ways that they present. And so my first issue here is I'm trying to get as good a result as I can without really changing the shapes or the thicknesses of the teeth. And that's really difficult to do well, especially when you're doing no preparation like my goal was here. So basically what I did is I sat down and I really try to get an understanding of what the patient wants and what the patient's concerns and underlying fears are. And she had a dentist who had attempted to do some composite veneers on these teeth to mask this discoloration, but she really wasn't happy with the way that turned out and ended up having the dentist remove all of that. And so she was really hesitant. When I first brought up the idea of veneers, they were really hesitant. Mom was obviously in the room because this is a minor, so both parties were really not a little bit skeptical about this idea of veneers. So what can we do in those cases? Well, for me, with the digital technology that I have, meaning a design software and a 3D printer, I said, look, I get it. You were burned by this process once before, but let me show you just real quickly what might be possible with your smile. So I took an intraoral scan. We always take photographs in our cosmetic consults, and I did a quick mock-up of the teeth that I 3D printed. And I 3D printed it out of Onyx Tough 2, and I used this material because, one, I'm trying to get the most masking ability from a really thin layer of material. So I needed a material that was not going to be super translucent, but instead have a little bit of opacity to it. And Onyx Tough 2 is a good material for this type of an indication. And so I just printed a quick mock-up for the patient, put it on the teeth, and I said, look, if we could get close to this, is this something that you think would make you happy? Would this kind of make you feel more comfortable? Because obviously for a teenage girl, this is something that is deeply personal, right? To have something about you physically that stands out that people can kind of, focus on. And maybe she was been teased, I don't know all the details there, but when I slid this on her teeth and I gave her the mirror, I mean, she was ecstatic. And they immediately said, yes, this is something that we want to do. So we did do a little bit of whitening because I figured, and in most cases, this is a discussion that needs to be had before you do veneers, especially if you're planning on using a little bit of a lighter shade. And this is just an A1, so we're not going super bright here, but we want to make sure that the veneers match the lower teeth. And as much as possible, we want, when we're doing no prep and we're doing really thin restorations, we want to make the teeth underneath the restorations as bright as possible as well. So we did about 3 weeks of whitening. We gave those teeth a couple of weeks after that to even out. And that's really important because if you think about how whitening works, it's utilizing hydrogen peroxide, which is a lot of oxygen in that. And we know how oxygen can inhibit our ability to polymerize our dental materials. So it's really important that if you have a patient who's whitening, that you give them a couple weeks post-whitening to let that oxygen dissipate out of the tooth to be able to get as good a bond as possible with whatever it is that you're trying to accomplish, whether that's direct composite, whether that's ceramic veneers, or in this case, these 3D printed veneers. And so when we sat down and I slipped this over the teeth, I said, is there anything that you would change about this? And she pointed out kind of a couple of small things, but for the most part, this is her smile just augmented, right? We didn't change too much about the shapes of the teeth. And so I was really able to, on this photo, really zoom in and take a look at how effective really is this at masking the teeth, knowing that once the cement goes in and once these are bonded, we are going to get a little bit of show through of that discoloration underneath. And when I asked her this question, I said, if a little bit of this still shows through, are you still going to be okay with the result? Because I wanted to make sure it's really important you communicate the challenges that you have with cases with your patients. And she was totally fine with it. And so that's a really important thing is that if the result of the case is not going to be optimal for whatever reason, right? And in this case, we needed a really thin material. And so that was a huge part of why this was not going to be optimal, because we were doing no preparation. And we were going to get a little show through. It's important that you communicate that on the front end to the patient, okay? So she was thrilled with the design. We made a couple of small tweaks, and then we were able to print these as individual veneers. And this is a case that I just delivered last week, so I don't have final healed photos. This is the immediate post-op of this case, but you can see that these veneers did a really nice job of masking that. And yes, you still can see a little show through, but keep in mind that this photo was taken with a really bright flash. And she's not walking around in life with a giant strobe shining on these teeth. So when you look at these from a conversational distance, the ability of this material to mask that discoloration at just about 200 microns or 300 microns of thickness is really impressive. So she was stoked, mom was stoked. When I charge for something like this, especially with a young patient, because I know that this is probably realistically a 5 to 7 year restoration for them, I usually charge what I would charge for a direct composite veneer. So I'm not charging my usual ceramic fees, especially for a material like Onyx Tough, because it is not a ceramic. You cannot coat it as a ceramic because it doesn't have crossed the threshold of the 50% ceramic filler content. So these are resin veneers, and once again, we'll keep an eye on these. We'll see how they age, and I'll give you guys some updates as the years go by. By the way, I always take this photo kind of immediately after I do my initial cleanup, just to make sure that I can't visualize anything, any additional cement that I may have missed. And in this case, if you look over adjacent between 10 and 11, you can't see a little bit of extra cement there. So there are times when I can see everything in a photo, and things that I can't necessarily see through my loupes, I pick up on a photo. So that was a pretty obvious one over there. But I'll take some final healed photos that will attach to this once this program airs. So nice case, no prep. Really, not a lot of these types of cases are doable as no prep, and there are often things that have to do with the positioning of the teeth that are compromises that you have to make when you're doing no preps, especially teeth that might be a little labily inclined. As you can imagine, make it difficult to then add more thickness and bring them even further towards the lip. So there's a lot of times where if we want to do true no prep veneers, we have to do a little clear aligner therapy beforehand. And once again, that's just something that needs to be communicated with the patient, right? As an option, as a treatment option. If your teeth aren't in the right position, we can't do no prep veneers and get a great result. We need to put the teeth in the correct position in order to do that. And a lot of patients nowadays are asking for no preparation or minimal preparation. So it's nice to have photos on hand of some cases that you've done previously. You can show the patient of, if you are doing minimal preparation, what does that really look like? Because patients don't know, right, what 0.2 of a millimeter or 0.3 of a millimeter of reduction looks like. They see these horror shows of preps that people post on, in YouTube or Google or whatever, and that's kind of always in the back of their mind. Are you going to grind my teeth down to stumps? Obviously, we're not going to do that in many of these veneer cases at all, actually. And if teeth do require full coverage, there's usually a reason for that, and it's just a matter of educating your patients. So let's transition from no prep to minimal prep. And this is Mary's story. So when Mary comes in, and once again, Mary was a patient of ours for a while, and she'd been coming through hygiene, and we talked about doing a little bit of something to augment her smile over the years. But, it's something that sometimes patients have to warm up to, whether it's the financial aspects of it or whether it's just, it's a very emotional thing to get work done on your front teeth, because there's a certain level of trust that needs to be achieved in order to do that. So it took me a couple of years of talking and getting to know Mary before I think she really felt comfortable with me doing this case. So when she came in, you can see in her smile that first thing that stands out to me is she's got very uneven incisal edges, and that can mean an occlusal issue, that can mean previous trauma, that can mean a lot of things. So it's important to talk to your patients about how did these teeth get this way in the first place. The other thing that we can see is 8 and 9 are a little bit overlapped, which causes kind of a strange visual at the midline. And so once again, just a matter of talking to your patients. If we want to get an optimal result, I am going to need to prep, and I am going to need to open up contact at that midline in order to take two teeth that are overlapped and make an ideal, basically central incisor relationship. And make sure that the midline is perpendicular to the eye line and right down the middle of the face. So it always involves taking photos, talking to your patients, and then coming up with a plan. And not every case is 8 units or 10 units. This is a 4-unit case. Mary's canines and everything distal to the canines are beautiful teeth. They're in good positions. They're a good color. This is just a matter of really needing to fix the front 4 in order to get an outstanding result for Mary. So when we look at this smile, what are you trying to visualize so you can plan these cases? Well, there's a couple things, and it all comes down to taking photographs. We already talked about the midline of 8 and 9. You can see a little bit of a kind of an incisal edge slope to Mary's smile, how things get a little bit longer as you go from her right to left. And that's something that we wanted to fix as well. She also felt like her laterals, even though I actually liked her laterals, she felt like her laterals were a little bit small. And I think that's just because of the relationship of 8 to 9. The other photo that we always take is the repose photo. And that's the photo in the middle here. And that is basically the lip at rest. And what that does is it shows us how much of the incisal edge display happens when that patient's lip is at rest. And in Mary's case, she has a good incisal display, but I felt like we could add maybe just a little bit of length, 0.5 millimeter to 1 millimeter more of length, and still be comfortably within what was appropriate for the length of the central incisor. The other thing to keep in mind is you always want to measure your central incisors. The average length of those centrals is about 10.5 millimeters. And so if you find that a patient has a central incisor that's only 9.5 millimeters, you can often probably get away with adding a little bit of length without it looking like a rabbit teeth, right? We never want to make those central incisors too long. We used to call them buck teeth when I was a kid. I don't know if that term is still used, but rabbit teeth is probably more something that everybody can understand. So that's the kind of stuff that we're looking at. And then obviously we're looking at the occlusion as well. We want to see where those mandibular incisors are. A lot of times what happens is if a patient has a malocclusion, the mandibular incisors have super erupted a little bit and are really interacting with the incisal edges of the maxillary anterior teeth. And so we want to make sure that that's not happening. We don't want to add length to these teeth and then have them constantly be under stress because of the occlusion. So that's always something that we want to think about as well. And for Mary, we put her into exocad to do a little basic wax up. I always do my own wax ups because it's the first step in planning a case. And this helps me to really start to understand what some of the challenges are going to be in any given case. And so for Mary, it's just a matter of taking some photos. This is an older version of exocad where the teeth didn't look very photorealistic at all. This is a much nicer process to put them into Smile Creator nowadays. But once again, 4 teeth is the goal. And we want to be able to make her look as natural as possible. We need a good ceramist, whether we're going to do it ourselves or whether we're going to outsource this like I did. We need a good ceramist who can make these blend into the natural dentition and make it all look very natural. So this is the process that we use. From this, we get an STL model that becomes basically the way that we make our prototypes or our provisionals on the day of preparation. And this is important for a couple of reasons. One, we can use that mock-up in order to make sure that we prepare enough and just enough to structure to be able to get the minimal material thickness that we need for whatever it is that we are going to make or the lab is going to make. The other thing we can do with this is we can give the patient the ability to preview their smile. And that's super important as well, because if the patient's not happy with their provisionals, it's going to be really difficult to make them happy with their final restorations. So for us, the rule of thumb was if they don't absolutely love their provisionals, we're not moving forward to the final restorations until we can make them happy. So they'll come in for what's called a provisional approval, and we will actually augment the teeth if necessary to be able to address any concerns that they have, whether the teeth are too long, too short, line angles, embrasure sizes. All those things are editable in the provisional stage, and you need to make sure that the patient is 100% happy with those provisionals. Then you can take an intraoral scan of the actual provisionals in the patient's mouth, because we know the occlusion is correct and we know the shapes are those that they love. And this way, when you send that off to the laboratory, or if you sit down and you do the lab work yourself, you can make sure that you mimic those exactly. Really, really important point there to make sure that you are ensuring success in a case. Now, there are always patients who might be a little bit crazy, or let's say crazy is not a nice word. Let's say very particular, right, with things. And so there are times when even if they love provisionals, they may still give you a little pushback on the finals for whatever reason. So I can't say that 100% of the time this workflow works, but I will say that the vast majority, 98, 99% of the time, this is the key to success in these types of cases. And then from that STL file, we print a model and we can make a silicone index, a putty essentially. And once again, this becomes the basis for how we provisionalize the patient. Now, this model is really, really important because we need it to be high quality, right? We don't want to be able have a rough or inaccurate model of our wax up. So we want to print this on a good printer, and we want to print it as fine a Z-axis layer thickness as we can get. There are some printers that print really nice models at 100 microns. There are some that if you can print them at 25 microns, you will get an absolutely gorgeous model. And remember, the model, any imperfections in the model is going to transfer to the silicone putty, which is then going to transfer to your provisionals. So it's important to get that model really nice before making that index. The other point here is, when we 3D print these models, there's almost always a layer of unpolymerized resin that sits on the surface of that model. And it's important that you get rid of that prior to trying to make your silicone index, because any place the silicone index touches the putty, if there's unpolymerized resin on that surface, it will keep your putty from curing. Essentially, these are two-part mixtures, these silicone putties, and when you mix them together, they have to go through essentially a curing process as well, and so it won't set up directly adjacent to your model if you haven't gotten rid of that unpolymerized resin. And to do that, it's important that you are curing that model either in a nitrogen curing unit, right? An oxygen-free curing unit. Essentially, nitrogen pushes out all the oxygen to allow for complete polymerization. Or the easy and simpler way is to just submerge it in glycerin and run it an additional cycle in your curing unit in glycerin to get rid of that oxygen-inhibited surface. And so that's a really important point, because there are times when I have created these silicone indices and I've gone to then make my provisionals, and if you have a section of that putty that's actually still gooey, you can imagine that's going to transfer into your provisionals, and that is not a good day when you take your silicone index off and you still have blue, in this case, the color of the silicone index in your provisionals, right? You're essentially giving your patient blue teeth. And so that is a bad day when that happens. And so really, really important, if you're printing your own models, you have to manage that oxygen inhibited layer in order to get complete polymerization of your silicone index, okay? So for Mary, the provisionals ended up looking absolutely dynamite. She loved them. We made a couple of small tweaks to it, but once again, this is provisional approval day. And if the patient's happy, man, I'm happy. I'm gonna take photos of those. I'm gonna take an intraoral scan of those, and I'm gonna, in this case, send all that off to the lab, so the lab can now create those final restorations. We have to take some photos because we love the arts and crafts of dentistry of our final restorations. And then this was Mary after those restorations were delivered. What a transformation. Beautiful ceramics. These were feldspathic. That, you know, sometimes when you're doing minimal prep and you need a really thin ceramic, feldspathic porcelain is something that can look really beautiful. And also really natural, especially when you're only doing 4 teeth and you're blending those ceramics into the patient's smile. So, and once again, we got to retake the repose photo because these are some of my favorite photos. Added a little length, but it still looks really good in the repose. So what a case, what a fun case, but once again, challenging on the front end to predict that you're going to need some preparation on these teeth, making sure you're giving your lab or yourself room to create a really beautiful smile for this patient. And you know, it's just once you get into the flow and you get the verbiage down of how to talk to patients, I think that becomes easier and easier. We have a lot of resources here at the Mod Institute on talking to patients. These are premium in our premium resource section where Wally has these chairside chats that he creates for how to talk to patients and how to really, you know, express what concerns you have maybe about a case, being realistic about the results that we can get, and just really educating your patients. That takes time. That's something that we're not inherently good at as dentists. It's something that I've had to learn over the years, but it's really, really important that we're talking to our patients and educating them. So once again, if you're interested in veneers, we have a whole bunch of really classes and resources for you, but I think the place to start is our 3D printed smile design and veneers course. This is a 2-day course. We're giving it in March. I think there's still just a handful of seats available, not many. We're bumping up our classroom size this year, so that's super exciting. And so we do have some spots that are still available for this. So keep in mind that this is part 1 of our veneer series here in Study Club. The next episode will be more related to the materials and how we select which material for veneer cases. So keep that in mind moving forward. Hopefully that'll be coming in the next few months. But right now we're going to transition more to hearing from our mod faculty in a group discussion format about how they feel about the ins and outs of veneer treatment. Keep in mind that you can add questions down in the chat and we'll be standing by to answer those in real time. There we go. It's on Brazilian time.
Is that apple juice?
Apple juice with alcohol.
What's up, guys? Today we are talking about every dentist's favorite topic. Yep, veneers. Those little magical pieces of porcelain artwork that are sexy subjects of all the Instagram porn that dentists just love to scroll through. Wally was just scrolling just a second ago, actually. Yeah. But here's the real question, and the one that every responsible clinician wrestles with. How much tooth structure do we actually need to remove to make these things look amazing? Because on one hand, you've got the no prep Instagram crowd, and on the other hand, you've got folks treating every veneer case like a circa 1990s 3/4 crown prep. Today we're breaking it all down, all the prep types, enamel versus dentin, why a few tenths of a millimeter can make or break a case, and how to both crush the case and respect the biology. If you've ever debated whether that thing you use every day is a dental handpiece or a magic wand, this is the episode for you. Who writes this stuff, Wally?
I mean,
That's ChatGPT.
yeah.
So with me today, of course, Wally Renee. You guys all know Wally, founder of the Mod Institute. We have Alan Quiros, also faculty here at the Mod. And our third faculty member is Casey Bennett. Casey Bennett's a private practice dentist here in Charleston. Casey, for those who may not have met you before, tell us a little bit about your journey in digital dentistry.
Yeah, so it started actually at MUSC, and like preclinical, we were scanning our preps and
Yeah, we were.
comparing it,
We
right?
Favorite
Which
student.
was super cool, you
Yeah.
know, objectively, you know, looking at what we did, and it was just super cool.
For the time, it was kind of legendary. I mean,
It still is legendary.
yeah.
I don't know if they're doing that anymore.
I doubt it.
But it was really cool because
Yeah.
my dad had stories of in dental school, you know, he would prep something and bring it to one professor and they'd be like, this is garbage. And then he would take it to another one and be like, this is beautiful. So
Yeah,
it was
same
like
prep.
super subjective.
I love that you just said your dad had that experience because I had that experience as well. So, and yes, I am the oldest one up here. So sorry, I didn't mean to
No,
interrupt.
yeah. But it started in dental school, right? And then I remember teaching you ukulele and you taught me digital design in exchange.
It was a fair exchange, but I would say that you mastered the digital, and I did not master the ukulele.
But yeah, and then from there, I was lucky enough to always practice, in a practice that had CAD CAM, had a scanner, and the rest is history. Once I got ExoCAD, it was just keeping everything in house and doing as much as I can and trying to just keep it at the highest quality that I can do.
Yeah.
So.
Love that. Yeah, Casey was definitely one of our students who right off the bat showed that he wanted to be doing things digitally, and he's taken that torch and actually run with it. And in many ways, he's exceeded, I don't know, what we can do ourselves.
Oh, for sure. I mean, super, super talented guy. And what's cool is as a model alumni, you've taken our curriculum and implemented it in a busy practice, running multiple hygienes, doing all your own ExoCAD, doing all your own printing, doing all your own milling, running 4 ops.
4 ops.
Yeah. Plus hygiene. So he's kind of a legend, and so that's why he's here to bring that real world twist to some of my kind of pie in the sky unicorn theory. So thanks for being here, Casey.
And if you're on the 3D printing Facebook group, you've seen Casey's work. He does absolutely gorgeous work, not only in the 3D printing space, but also milling. A lot of just really great cosmetic cases. So what I want this discussion to be mostly today is the thought process behind treatment planning and executing cosmetic cases, and really looking at how can we use our digital tools to plan these cases, to educate our patients on what to expect as far as tooth removal and possible tooth movement in some cases, and then how to just really be ready for prep day, coming in and making sure that you've got everything ready to go so that when that handpiece starts spinning, you know exactly where you need to prep, exactly how much, and you know basically exactly how that case is going to turn out. So Casey, I guess just start us off and talk about, like, when a patient comes in for a consult and they want veneers, like, how does that conversation go for you, and what are you doing in that appointment to like start that process?
Yeah. So a lot of times, they're existing patients and it's in hygiene, right? So talking to them, I only have 5 minutes, not even. So I kind of, I'm like, hey, why don't we bring you back? We'll get you in where we could have one-on-one time, and we can kind of talk about your goals, your aesthetic desires. And a lot of times that turns into the trial smile appointment. Which, we'll take some scans, take some records. We'll look and see, where are the teeth right now? Where can we place the teeth? Do they want to have a different shade? Is it something we can fix with just bleaching? Do we have to do clear liners? Like, what do we need to do? We could sit down and actually discuss all those options. And
I guess that a super important point, Casey, that we're talking is like the connection with the patient, like to make him understand, or them understand, that the treatment plan, the most part of the times, are not just veneers. You need like a multidisciplinary like team, like ortho 100%. And sometimes implants. Before go to the final. So it's super important, this first appointment, just connecting here, Tony. I always try to connect with my patient, understand. And I can't talk about veneers without talk about photography. All of us, we take pictures, guys. So I guess that is the
critical
big first step. When we are doing records, for sure, we are digital. The other day, the guys were talking about scanning, but I guess that the photography, dental photography, professional, not like smartphone pictures, are the big secret. So many times I listen from my patients like, oh, I didn't see that my teeth are so bad or too bad like this. So you can explain and they can understand you. So this that we're talking right now, it's so important, like for the first appointment.
Sometimes it'll just be, I take a picture of their smile and I put it up on the screen. All of my ops have a 32-inch TV basically at the foot. And so we'll just sit there and look together.
Now you wax your own cases. You wax all your stuff in ExoCAD. Tony, you dabble and like to wax. I wax all my own cases. For me as a clinician, guys, the most important thing I learn about my patient is when I sit down and diagnose and wax the case. That is the true diagnosis, because you gain profound insights on where the teeth are in the patient's face, because you're going to take the photos, you're going to take the face scan, you're going to take the intraoral scans, you're going to merge them all together and start sculpting. And this is where I learn things about, hey, this is a clear liner case. This probably is a comprehensive ortho case. Or, hey, this is a prep or a no prep case. Because people always ask, hey,
how do you know if it's a prep or a no prep? Or I'm like, well, listen, it's really hard to know that just from a glance.
Yeah.
Like when you sit down and start sculpting teeth in the patient's face
100%.
virtually, hey, that's how I know it's a prep or a no prep case. And then I could go to the patient and say, hey, listen, we've tried our best to keep these as thin as possible. Let's print a trial smile, see how they look, and let the patient.
Yeah.
For
print,
this
print
reason?
it even if it's not going to be perfect.
Yeah.
Print it.
Yes.
And for this reason, Wally, it's I guess that the purpose of it here is bring the real tips, right? So Casey told something that caught my attention. Like I have monitors at the office, at the operating rooms to talk with the patient and make them understand what you are trying to explain. I always joke with my patients that they don't understand about zeniths, incisal edges, rotations.
No.
When you say, hey, do you understand that the zenith, and the patient is like, I always say this, that they are seeing like pink elephants flying.
Yeah.
Okay, and they are agreeing with you, right? So the monitor is a great tip. So photos, monitor, communication.
Yeah.
Design the case while just complementing your idea, man. For this reason, I guess that we motivate a lot our students to design exocad.
We try to encourage it. I mean, Casey, you're probably like a 10-minute design.
Yeah.
I'm 10 minutes.
10, 15 minutes.
Alan,
I would like to be like Wally. That's 10 minutes.
Yeah, no. You're 10, 15 minutes. I mean, the issue is people get frustrated on their first, second, third design, especially clinicians. They're sitting there for 30, 40 minutes and it looks bad. And then they give up. And then they send it off. And that's fine.
Don't give up though. The first occlusal guard that I designed took like over an hour. Occlusal guard. So
Respect
like,
your curve.
Yeah.
It's a big curve, and it's not
is.
for everybody. I mean, Maud's here to help you if you guys need any help in the way for whether it's lab services. Alan leads our lab along with Mike. But we really want you to try to design because that diagnostic.
Yeah, this is a big point.
All my full mouth reconstructions, I'm waxing.
Yeah.
At the proper vertical, I'm working through all the issues before I touch the patient with the drill.
Mm-hmm.
That's not true just for veneers or full mouth rehabs. It's the same for guided surgery, for example.
yeah.
I always say that, man, if you don't plan your cases, you are losing a lot.
Yeah.
Because when you are planning, when you are designing, you are learning.
Yeah.
You are making the diagnosis. And also, for example, how many times when I started doing like walks up for veneers, I understand, oh man, this teeth I need to prep, this tooth I need to prep a little bit more.
Yeah.
Or if the patient don't want to prep, this case, the patient needs to go to ortho.
Yeah.
You know, so when you start designing, you start understanding and closing the diagnosis. So I guess that the big tip here, guys, is exocad is part of the game.
Yeah.
That's fine that you are not able, or if you don't want to design the whole cases, but you need to understand the software. Because, for example, for sure, we are mod restorative studio. You can send us, or if you have your design team, they can design for you, but it's fine to receive the design and review that and change things. You know, like sometimes you have some extra volume that you don't want, you can smooth. You know, you don't like the occlusion, you can change. So understand the exocad is part of the game to help, not like, oh, I'm a designer and I have to design everything. No, but I always say that it's my responsibility to take care of my patient. I can't delegate that for a CAD designer that never listened my patient.
Well,
so when I receive the project, I have the opportunity to check that. And so many times I check that together with my patient.
Well, the issue I find that when I get other designers to design for me is it's completely unrealistic. The first thing some designers do is
he's not talking about me, okay?
They take the natural teeth and they extract them all virtually, and then they wax the case up. I'm like, how am I going to
so bulky,
How am I going to do anything with that? Because you have teeth coming out where the natural teeth aren't even near.
Unrealistic.
Two points that we respect a lot,
Looks good.
right?
Yeah.
Aesthetic and function.
And to add one more to that is conservative, right?
Yeah. Minimal preparation.
I'd much rather have a wax up that compromises on a few things if it means I could reduce the tooth less, and I think your patients would agree, than having a wax up that is completely perfect, but it means I'm mowing down teeth into dentin, or having to put the patient through comprehensive ortho for 3 years, just so I could get a perfect result. I think you'll find that patients are willing to compromise on minute aesthetic details that we see, that they don't really see, in order to be more conservative for their treatment. I think you'll find that almost unanimously they'll select conservative over perfection.
And in reality, it's just a matter of educating your patients and helping them to make that decision. In the end, it's their teeth. So a couple of points. You guys accelerated through a lot of what I wanted to talk about, but let me take a step back and talk about, like, a lot of times when people come in, their teeth have changed over the years, right? They've worn down their teeth because of occlusal issues or regular wear and tear or whatever, maybe they're malpositioned. Like, there's all sorts of reasons that patients will then seek out your treatment. So for me, the records appointment, super important, not only for starting to plan the case, but talking about how we got here and what we need to do to make sure that whatever we do dentally is not going to essentially have the same problems, right? So how can we make things in the system better? And for me, those records are imperative for that. And the wax ups helps us with that, but also sitting down and showing the patient their teeth, maybe on the intraoral scan, showing them the heat map of their occlusion and talk about what is happening in their mouth that has gotten them to this point so that they understand that, their teeth wearing 2 or 3 millimeters in the anterior is not a normal thing. And it's not that we can just add length back to those teeth and they're going to be fine. That's just not the case. Patients don't understand that. It's up to us to help educate them on that, right? And so the wax up for me is patient education, and it's a hugely valuable thing for starting to plan the case. And that's why I think more than anything else, having control of that wax up is the first step of the prep appointment, because we can take that wax up, we can overlay it over the unprepped teeth, and we can actually visualize how much reduction we're going to need. And we can tell the patients, we're going to need 0 reduction. We're just going to need around some corners, or this tooth is sticking out to the buccal. I'm going to have to mow this down in order to make this happen. And then it's up to the patient to figure out where their values lie. Do they want this done tomorrow? Because a lot of patients come in and they say, Wally, right, I have to go to a wedding this weekend. I want this done right away.
It's always a wedding.
Right. And or maybe they're willing to wait to get a better, more conservative result. And having control of that wax up is, I think, the best way to do that. So, for me, exocad is incredibly powerful. It does a lot of things, but the first thing that I did when I got exocad was start doing my own wax ups. The very first thing, because of how powerful it is for this process.
You'll be a better dentist for it. I mean, so at Mod we teach no prep veneers, micro prep veneers, and minimum prep veneers. And the way that they differ is pretty profound. A no prep veneer obviously is exactly what it says. You don't touch the tooth with a burr. We like to do those mostly 3D printed because we could feather the margins into after bonding them into almost nothing. So there's no hygiene issues or anything like that with resin. And we love to print those. The micro prep veneers are when you really don't have a margin or a defined preparation. You're really just removing a line angle here or smoothing a corner. It's ultra conservative, and so much so that if you sent the patient home, you would almost not be able to tell you did anything to their teeth. It is as if you're just doing some subtle recontouring of some areas.
Removing some old resins.
Some little bits here or there, exactly. And then there's minimum prep, which Alan teaches very, very good techniques for guided reduction, where you put your mock-up, you do your depth cuts, we do 300 microns, and there's a systematic approach to reduction, including reducing the tooth. And we like to do zirconia veneers when we do minimum prep.
More than 300, I can tell you that probably the most of case that we do is like 150.
Yeah.
Because when we wax up, we have some areas that we add material.
That's true.
And we have some few areas that we need to reduce, but not that totally like the 0.3. Sometimes it's like 100, 150. So it's the minimal preparation guided through the mockup. So
it's a good point. It's 0.3 from the desired contour.
Yeah, exactly.
So if we're doing a additive wax up, and maybe it's not completely additive everywhere in the case, but maybe most of it's additive, that could very well mean when you do your depth cuts on that mock-up, whether it's printed or bisacryl injection molded, and Alan and I we kind of battle what's better. But when you do your depth cuts on that, you might very well find that you actually don't hit tooth structure except in one or two spots.
Just in the mock-up itself.
It's mostly all in the mock-up, and that therefore is basically a micro prep case.
Sometimes we take like 90 minutes, 10 units, like 2 hours doing the preps. When you remove everything, you look and say, it's the same.
It's the same.
But do you know what's the name for these guys? Respect. Respect for
Respect
the patients.
the patients.
Because I always say that phrase in my course, that it's not just about the industry. It's about the trusting that the patient bring us.
To do the least harm to get the desired result.
Yeah.
It's just the
Because
way.
everything that we do, we can go back.
Yeah.
You know, like if you do a preparation for a patient, you can go back.
They're stuck for life.
But Alan, I see all over social media, we see no prep veneers, no prep veneers, no prep veneers. Like, Casey, in your experience, like what percentage of patients who come in are actually the kind of case where you can do zero prep? In my experience, it's pretty rare.
It's not everyone.
It's definitely not everyone.
Now, going back to Wally's point, though, is some people desire that no prep. So you make these aesthetic compromises, right? And so it might not be what we want, what it is ideal for us with the eye for it.
Yeah.
But it's what the patient wants, and it's good for the patient. It gets their desired outcome.
It's a good
right?
point. It's a good point.
Really good point.
You could. So what we don't compromise on is biological compromises, right?
Yeah.
Patients will sometimes demand that from us, but we don't budge. But aesthetic compromises, to the benefit of the patient as it relates to being more conservative, this is where people on Instagram and stuff really get me upset, because you'll do a beautiful case, 9 out of 10, but no reduction. And it's gorgeous. And somebody will comment, oh, the mesial lobe of that lateral is just a little bit too prominent. And you're like, really, guy?
Yeah.
Like, you know, we literally saved this patient's enamel. They're in tears of joy, but you have to comment on like an asymmetry that, guess who the only person would see that?
A dentist.
And it's a macro photo, right?
It's like zoomed up. It's like some
And a really good point, Wally, you said this some person is a dentist.
Yes.
Yeah,
Right?
That
So
too. Yeah.
we need to understand, guys, that what we can see, maybe 90% of the time, the patients can't.
Well, we know this from the literature.
We talk about that, like the midlines
midline.
off. Oh no, but the midlines off, man, the patient's not fixing on this detail. So I totally agree when you say, Case, that each patient desires or not this kind of treatment. And this is a negotiation between the cosmetic, not the biology.
Never
Okay?
compromise
Never
biology.
compromise the biology, okay? But it's a negotiation with the patient, trying to the patient see that, hey, if I don't do any preparation in your teeth, look, this area, I need to add volume because it's no prep, right?
And that goes back again to how important the trial smile appointment, waxing is.
everything.
Communication.
Because if you go ahead and do that and you try it in and the patient loves it, who are we to say that it's not exactly what the patient needs?
I'm going
And
to
the
tell you.
tip, guys, take pictures and show for your patients with the screen, because if the patients, something that I never do, just sorry to cut you, Wally. We have mirrors here, right?
Yes.
Something that I never do is bring mirrors for
No,
the patient.
not the hand
mirror.
You know, because
Yeah.
they are going to do this and say, hey, but it's bulky. Hey, this is about no. Take pictures, because I always say that the smile should make the analysis together with the face.
Yeah.
So portrait pictures and
a good
smile
point,
pictures
Al.
are good point. So never do that when you are doing try smile first. For sure, you are going to show the patient and you can bring the mirror, but not at the first time.
Yeah.
You know, because I always like to talk about the experience behind a smile design.
Yeah.
Okay. So when the patient build in their mind, like, oh man, it changed a lot, and you have like the pre-op picture and the post, like the preoperatory and the smile trial side by side. The patient's face is smiling, the patient just can see the smile, but not so close and not with a mirror. They see, hey man, it changed a lot, I like. So the first message is, I like.
Yeah.
Okay, when you send, it's the same case, but if you bring the mirror first, the patient see, I don't know, some spot or some asymmetry.
They'll focus on something that
you know,
isn't
and they
important for
focus,
the
and
whole
the first
smile, yeah.
message like, I don't know if I like.
Yeah.
It, you know, it it breaks the process.
Yeah.
Believe me, it looks like so simple, but I never do that. All my cases, pictures. then I excuse and I say for my patient, hey, you can see this point. I can do this better if we make minimal preparation. Hey, you can see this point for the finals is going to be better.
That's rating, like looking at them too.
But
their
we are
reaction to
telling
it,
them,
right?
Yeah,
you know,
for sure.
it's not they are telling us.
Yeah.
When this happens, this inversion is like the patient feels like, it's
They
like,
own it.
I can trust 100% in my dentist because I say things that I'm telling him that he didn't see that.
Yeah.
When
Yeah.
you say first, when
that.
you tell first, it's like, I'm seeing that and I'm going to adjust that for the
Yeah.
finals. So it's like we are here and the patient is here. I'm talking about like the technical point because it's so important to keep the control for the case, the whole case, since the first appointment until the end of the appointment.
Well, for me, guys, the main thing is every patient is a no prep veneer case until proven otherwise. I mean, I've even had patients come in who, first of all, patients these days are wanting no prep, min prep, numb free, drill free, pain free, everything, right? So they come in and ask for that.
Free too. They want it.
They want free, yeah, for sure. Oh, for sure. But they come in and they ask for it, and rather than having an attitude or being like, "There's no way on this planet that you're a no prep veneer case or your teeth are sticking out like this," I look them straight in the eyes and I say, "I would love nothing more than to be able to do no prep veneers on you. Enamel is one of the most precious things that we have in the human body. Let's go ahead and try it. I'm going to make the world's thinnest veneers," and I mean that. Like, we print them 150, 180 microns thick and then hand thin them, and we're going to try them in, and if you love them, we'll go forward with it. And what happens is you do that and you try them in, and the patients look and they either cry, they love it, or they're like, "Oh, why are these bulky?" And you could say, "Well, we added to your teeth. Your teeth are already very prominent. We need to do clear aligner therapy to bring those back into alignment. And then we could do no prep veneers." So it's a whole, get the patient involved.
They're definitely part of it.
And you just can do that if you design it, not just if you design the case, but if you understand the case.
Yes, you have to understand.
And,
you know?
and even more so than in other parts of the mouth, with the smile, it's so important to have the patient along for the ride. They don't want to feel like you're hijacking their veneer case. You have to communicate, what are they looking for? Essentially try to replicate that in your wax up, that then becomes their provisionals. They get approval of their provisionals. You can digitally copy those perfectly, right? Or in some cases, use the exact same file that you use for the wax up to then create the finals if they use it. And it's a slam dunk to do it digitally versus having to like send a picture to the lab or something and then having them try to do their best to wax up an exact replication of what the patient really likes.
Sony, we could literally get a patient in, do min preps, and have final 3D printed veneers done in a matter of an hour.
We did a whole full mouth rehab case starting during the morning. You did, guys.
That's
We
true.
started in the morning and we bonded 24, 26,
28,
28 pieces.
You guys are wild.
The secret is, I have to be honest. I mean, I know you guys, the audience, might not like this. I mean, the secret's design. It's having command of your design, knowing your dentistry, and combining those synergistically. You're unstoppable.
Yeah.
I mean, that's Casey in action. That's Alan, Tony. You're getting to be one of the better designers now.
I guess that when we motivate people to start designing, I was in Chile last week.
That's right.
And I have a friend that I motivate him to start designing his case, And another friend, he motivated another one, and we were together drinking some beer. And this guy arrived and said, "Hey, Alan, I need to say thank you." Or why? Because now I can't trust anymore in any design there. I just trust in me myself doing my case. And this joke, it's represented exactly like this. There's no anyone better than you to understand your patient because you listen your patient, you see your patient, you touch your patient, right? You scan your patient. So the best person to understand your patient is you. And the exocad is the tool that you can connect, the record with the design and what's coming next,
and
right?
You know the biology, you know the periodontal health, you know
everything.
Now, here's the thing that gets me upset is people think, "Oh, you just want to design because you don't want to pay the lab bill, the $10 a tooth or whatever."
It's not about it. It's not about
I want to design
Yeah.
because I love my patient.
Yeah.
And I want to learn from designing. I want them to have the best I could do. Has nothing to do with being cheap.
And I will say that there are times when I've seen smiles that have been outsourced or designed by somebody else, and to me they look like if Costco made teeth, like that's what these wax ups look like. They're just very generic, very rudimentary. Like knowing the personality of the patient and then being able to design their smiles, actually really a cool, powerful way to connect with the patient, I think.
Include
especially when you do it like right in front of them.
Oh yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Like so I have like
immediate.
That's
killer.
next level. That's next
in
level.
my office I have it set up again.
guys-
We have the screen kind of right there at the foot of the chair, and I just have ExoCAD right on there.
Yeah.
I'm waxing up their smile right in front of them.
That's Mod Pro level though.
But it's so powerful.
Mod
And
Pro.
a lot of times
That's why
they're
he's
just,
got the shirt.
they
He's
just
using
sit
the
there
Mod
and
Pro
their
t-shirt.
jaw drops, and they're just amazed at just even the program itself, right? And so, yeah, it's
something
cool.
and something that's cool, Casey, talking about like doing together with the patient.
Yeah.
You know, like
Bespoke.
that's super important, right? Because
Oh yeah.
from my perspective, like working with smile design, I work with veneers, I guess around maybe eight years that I work with veneers. And these kind of treatments are not these are expensive, right? It's not
Yeah.
cheap
Yeah.
treatment, right?
Not
So
inexpensive, yeah.
the patients need to invest money, time, right?
And trust you.
And trusting, you know, it's more than that, for sure. But talking about money is like, man, sometimes you need to convince the patient that you are the best. And why are you the best? Why do I need to try to trust in you? You know, when you start doing all this stuff in live with your patient, like you receive your patient and you have an intraoral scanner. Some tips here, guys. You scan your patient. You know what's a scanner, okay? The patient not. So look, this is a scanner. No more impressions.
Magic wand.
You know, like few seconds and precision.
That's true.
Oh wow.
Harry Potter.
You know, it's
Same
excuse
thing with printing.
the same. So face scanner. You know, like look, you have a face scanner here. So it's the concept of a digital patient. So
Yeah.
try to talk more with your patient about the tools that you have in your practice. It makes the difference, you know, for the decision for the patient. So you take pictures, you scan, you have face scanner, you plan with your patient. Like we have so many different tools to communicate, like Smile Cloud,
even-
that we use to motivate the patients in live.
While you're planning and things too, you can show
Exocarding
them
that.
like, hey, look at your occlusion. This
Yeah.
is where
Totally.
you're wearing. This is why this is going to be difficult to design this veneer. They can see
make
it.
you an expert,
Yeah.
right, for your patient. So the patient's like, man, I can't believe that I'm living this in live.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know, so
Yeah.
I can't trust in another guy that's not this guy.
Well, and two,
do that, right? So
and
that's the
two,
message.
Another point too, I'm running a busy practice, and it's like, where do you find time to design? Well, I'm doing it with them, right? That is part of the appointment.
It's
so
part of the process. No excuse.
It's
no
not.
excuse.
It's not. I don't have to be spinning a handpiece and drilling on teeth every single
Nah,
time
that's
I'm
what
with the
the
patient,
consultants
right?
say,
so
man.
so what I'm able to sit there and do my work with them, right? And then the design is there. The plan is done.
It's the biggest misconception that we as dentists only find joy or only profitable when we're spinning a handpiece. And actually, one of the most fun times of my day is when I get to sit down and do a little bit of lab work, a little bit of design, mill a hybrid all in X arch, do some Mio characterization, do some artwork, put my headphones on, have a coffee, have some wine, and really do good for the patient in that lab work. And it breaks up the monotony of being hunched over a patient all day. 100%. And I got to tell you, like for me, veneers are, I would say 80% of my business. And then I would say all in X and full mouth reconstructions make up the rest. And for me, I mean, we do a lot of veneers, and we do zirconia, disilicates, and printed.
Let's talk about materials, because that's an important thing. I think maybe people think all we do are printed veneers, but the reality is, I mean, I've seen Casey do some beautiful Empress.
Yeah.
Right,
Empress
Empress
is
in
great.
the interior. I mean,
And
how do you figure out what the right material choice is for a patient? So we hope you have enjoyed this discussion on veneers. You know, veneers is something that seems like everybody has an opinion on, and everybody does it, maybe it's slightly different. So it's kind of cool to hear a different opinion, especially from our mod faculty who are so incredibly talented and knowledgeable. Next episode, we are going to do part 2 of our veneer series, and we're going to look a little bit more at the materials used, how to select which material for which case, and kind of some options that you might have in some different price points. So we hope you will join us then.